Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Amanda, and I'm a part of the Social Enterprise Association at American University. And we are very excited to have Dr. Zachary Kaufman here to speak to us a bit today about his new book, Social Entrepreneurship in the Age of Atrocities. And Zachary has a vast array of experience in many different fields. He has worked as a pro bono counsel for Ashoka, which is a leading social entrepreneurship organization that supports and identifies entrepreneurs from all around the world. He is currently a fellow at Yale University and has a law degree as well. He also has a PhD from Oxford University in International Relations, where he was a Marshall Scholar. And as I mentioned, his JD was from Yale Law School. He was also the founder and president and chairman of the board of directors for the American Friends of the Kigali Public Library, which is a testament to his dedication to social impact and social entrepreneurship, as it was the first public library in Rwanda. So that's pretty awesome. And he also serves on the advisory board of another fantastic social enterprise, Indigo Africa, which empowers women. And is also on the American Planning Board of Humanity in Action, and serves on the Washington Lawyers Committee of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Zachary Kaufman.
Thanks a lot for having me here today, and thanks to all of you for coming out on a kind of cold and dreary night to be here together. I'm going to speak for about 30 minutes. And then let's open it up to your questions. And I'd also love to hear your comments about anything we talk about here, and maybe some of your own work as well. I'm mostly going to be talking about my new book, which Amanda mentioned, Social Entrepreneurship in the Age of Atrocities. And I want to start by thanking the School of International Service and also the Washington College of Law, which has been supportive of this event tonight. And in particular, I want to thank the Social Enterprise Association and the many people who contributed to making this happen this evening. So thanks to everybody. And I apologize if I forgot anyone. There's like an army of people working on social enterprise, which I think is fabulous. By the way, I don't think I've seen a more engaged university campus as AU in social enterprise so far. So really congratulations. And all of that. I've actually been dying to come here for like 2 years, and so it's great to finally get an invitation to be here. So this is the book. There are copies being sold outside, I hear, like hotcakes, so get them while they're hot. Actually, I don't think any of them have been sold yet. But all the money goes to charity, so I'm not getting rich off this or anything. So I hope that you'll buy a copy and maybe support some of the initiatives that are discussed in the book and that we'll talk about this evening. The book, by the way, focuses on basically the summary is about how business skills can be used to help post-conflict countries recover and thrive. And speaking of the book, I have a little puzzle for you. And the winner, by the way, is going to get a free copy of the book. Okay? So the catch is you can't cheat. So everybody promises not to cheat?
Yeah.
All right. So here's the puzzle. There are 2 countries in the world, and only 2 countries, that are double landlocked, meaning they're surrounded by countries which themselves have no access to the sea. Which are they? And you have to answer, you have to get both of them to get the free copy. And don't check your cell phone. Did I see a hand? You want to guess?
I can't remember one of them, and I think it's Kyrgyzstan or Uzbekistan was one of those 2. I remember it's one of the Central Asian countries.
Uzbekistan is one.
Uzbekistan is one.
You have to get both, though, to get the... Or we can just cut it in half.
I would guess someplace in Central Africa, but honestly I have no idea off the top of my head.
We got one. Anybody care to guess the other one?
Rwanda?
Nope. Although given the subject tonight, that would be a... It is landlocked, but not double landlocked. Should we come back to it?
Yeah.
All right. We'll come back at the end, okay? No cheating. So are there other social entrepreneurs here? I mean, I know this association's pretty big, and I'd love to hear what you're doing after the event. So if you don't mind staying for a bit. Yeah. Did you raise your hand?
Yeah, but I'm also in the social enterprise program. So.
Okay. That's what I mean. I mean, are there other people here who are doing it? I'd love to hear what you're doing if you wouldn't mind hanging out for a bit. So what we'll do this evening in this kind of time is to start off by just describing and a little bit about social enterprise. I know all of you are experts, but I know that there are also some other people new to the field in the room. So just all get on the same page. And because there are actually debates in the field, even the term itself is sort of contested. There's no consensus on the definition. I'll sort of explain what the definition and what I sort of think. Then we'll launch into a case study library that Amanda had mentioned, and the reason really why to focus on at least one case study is, those in the practices of social entrepreneurship are difficult to generalize, and in part because of a broad field. So I thought I would use at least one case study to illustrate some of the principles. I mentioned this other social enterprise special to me. It's called Indigo Africa. I'm not really doing much tonight, but I really just wanted to highlight it for you. Basically what we do is we work with collectives of men and women artisans, both Tutsi, which are the former ethnic groups, and they produce textiles and other merch that we then market and sell in the way Polo Ralph Lauren, Anthropology, J. Crew, Nicole Miller. If you're thinking about presents for someone for Valentine's Day, I highly recommend them. And all the money goes back into the collectives for skills training, education. So check it out if you can online at some point. Profiles. Also some of these other social enterprises, Americans for Informed Democracy, there's for Sierra Leone, and others. We won't be able to talk about them. So what exactly is entrepreneurship? The term, as has also been called other things, called social enterprise or social innovation and social venture. And Nick Kristof even called a type of yourself foreign aid. Bill Drayton, who's in the bottom right corner, I'm sure know, is often with coining the term social enterprise 20 years ago. And I think we're very privileged tonight. Ashoka's global legal director, Jonathan, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand in the back, with us here tonight. So if a lawyer or just another person interested in this, I recommend speaking to Jonathan after the event about what's going on at Ashoka. And so Drayton was a former manager at McKinsey & Company and then worked for the Environmental Agency. And then to found Ashoka in about 1980. Today is the premier association of leading global social entrepreneurs. And these social entrepreneurs, social enterprise itself, also have sort of others. Sometimes they're called social innovators, change agents, or change makers. Even this fun term that I heard, philanthrocapitalists. The more exciting terms, I think, for it. And so there are some sort of prominent examples of history. Susan B. Anthony is widely known as one of the early social women's rights leader. There's the environment, David Brower, the conservation, the education philosopher Mary Montessori, and these are some of the people throughout history that Ashoka cites as embodying this epitome of what it is for entrepreneurs. And so Ashoka, a following description of social entrepreneurship, is a powerful force for change in the new idea in the hands of a leading social entrepreneur. The job of a social entrepreneur is to recognize our society is stuck and to provide ways to get it unstuck. He knows what is not working and solves the problem by changing, spreading the solution, and persuading entire cities to take new leaps. Entrepreneurs are not content just to give a fish or to teach. They will not rest until they have revolutionized industry. And this sort of social entrepreneurship is usually viewed that uses business skills to pursue social goals instead of into the traditional entrepreneurial goal of financial aid. And so, for example, Pamela Hart heads up Oxford's program on enterprise. Describes a social entrepreneur as what you get when you combine Richardson and Mother Teresa, a hybrid between social value creation. The field of social entrepreneurship has become more than widespread. I think it's also that definition has also similarly broadened. And so, in my view, today, social means an innovative venture, for-profit, nonprofit, or combination which seeks to further a social goal. And many of these may or may not focus on utilizing business skills, use at least some, such as accounting and networking, fundraising, public relations, organizational formation, and administration. And so this expanded definition of social entrepreneurship overlaps with volunteerism, activism, philanthropy, and charity. The entrepreneurial aspect of it, that real pioneering spirit that sets entrepreneurship apart from other types of social work. Although it's been in one form or another for centuries, social entrepreneurship is a relatively new self-conscious field. In essence, the privatization and the secularization of activities that used to be considered the sole responsibility and province of government and religion. When exactly social entrepreneurship became a field, it's really pretty hard to determine. People who practice as such didn't really sort of self-identify, for lack of familiarity with the term, and also because, I mentioned, the term itself is fairly new. Areas might be considered the first type of social entrepreneurs. Manhattan Institute's Social Entrepreneurship, which presents annual awards to some of the leading entrepreneurs, traces the roots of this modern social entrepreneurship back to the 1850s to the 1910s in the U.S. And so they highlight individuals as modern social entrepreneurs. Robert Baden-Powell is in the top left. He is the Boy Scouts and Girl Guides. Thomas John Barnaboe, who founded Barnes for the Poor Children. I think he kind of looks like the Kevin Smith from the top left. Clara Barton founded the American Red Cross. William Booth founded the Salvation Army. Founded the Corcoran Gallery of Art. And so really what I think that the breadth of different types of social entrepreneurship, whether it be in wealth, housing, or children's rights, or women's, really sort of indicate on the huge scope that modern entrepreneurship today would embody. And that modern social entrepreneurship could be considered with Dr. Muhammad Yunus and of microfinance, which he developed in Bangladesh in the mid-1970s and when he founded a bank. And so he and the Grameen Bank Entrepreneurship was recognized and celebrated by their joint award of the 2006 Nobel Prize. Today there are enormous organizations and foundations and institutions, publications, websites, conferences, and competitions dedicated to the field of social entrepreneurship. There are lots of wealthy and famous individuals who are also pretty in social entrepreneurship today, whether by establishing foundations or so on. But what's really interesting, by the way, I went a little wild on so I hope that you'll forgive me. Bear with me. I was having fun. Students often through clubs or organizations, including other at AU, at both the law school and here at the school, international service, so ordinary citizens have significantly increasingly engaged in social entrepreneurship in recent years. And this broadening of social entrepreneurs themselves and also social, I think, really signifies a democratization of the field. More people are getting involved, doing more things, all of which I think is incredibly exciting. And also, it used to be that a lot of social sciences were sort of hierarchical and vertical. I think also reflecting the democratization field, a lot more social enterprise is becoming horizontal and collaborative. This is not to say, of course, that social entrepreneurship is free from controversy. There are quite a few and quite serious ones. One is that we must be realistic that there are unintended consequences. I confront working in developing countries that perhaps tensions might have some problematic effects. The flip, of course, too, is that a project work on might have an unintended positive as well, which is sort of interesting. The other issue is that there are a lot of questions about social entrepreneurs, enterprises themselves. One is that some of them focus, excuse me, a little too narrow on a particular fact or agendas that suit their interests. Another, and this is quite serious, is misrepresent what they're doing in order to raise more money for other units. And then a third is concerns about methodology. In a very exciting time right now, where there's rigor coming into the field of social entrepreneurship. This is one of the things that I think is really leading the way on. And yet this is something that a lot of social enterprise from, sort of a lack of transparency or even much thought how they're doing what they're doing. And so what do we do about these kind of unintended consequences and these critiques? Well, first of all, I think that we need to acknowledge that they exist. I mean, just like any industry, flaws and problems. I mean, social enterprise, as I mentioned early on, is a fairly new self-conscious field. And so it's in its early growing pains, and we need to work towards making it more rigorous and and transparent. Forces to develop solutions that are solutions, including in the quantitative that are being developed now to try to add more of that rigor to social. And then, of course, I think that we have lots of reason to be optimistic. As Margaret Mead said, that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And there are lots of fabulous examples throughout history, including very recently, where people, small groups have banded together to solve some significant problems. And this is, despite the potential problems, a reason for great optimism. So that brings to Rwanda in this case study of Kigali Public Library. During my early travels to Rwanda, which was about years ago, I heard that there was no library in the entire country, and this just shocked. It was amazing to think of any country in the world that didn't have a public library, and I knew the work that I was doing, and I was focusing on the prosecution of war criminals, just catastrophic it had been that there was no access outside media, which I'll talk about again. So for this part, I want to start by talking about the role of that media and literature up to and also during the Rwanda in 1994, and then a little bit about how that then formed the inspiration, motivation, and purpose behind developing Rwanda's first public library. So immediately before and during the genocide, the media and literature in Rwanda really played a role. First, it helped incite the genocide, and I'll give you some details in a second. And then even more disturbing, or at least equally just helped orchestrate or perpetrate the genocide, which I'll also talk about a little bit. There were two main types of media involved in this one. Newspapers, the most famous called Kungura, which means wake up in Kinyarwanda, which is the local language. And then the other was the radio. Radio, television, Libre de Milkoli, which was came to be known as, and also Radio Rwanda, which was the government radio. And so Kungura, the news, printed articles, but also illustrations, cartoons, really hatred towards Tutsi. And just as a few examples, they claim that this news that Tutsi had infiltrated various sectors of society and disproportionately were represented and dominating those sectors, economics, religion. They said that Tutsi women were devious and deadly seductresses of Hutu men. It was Tutsi who were planning the genocide in the Hutu. That's actually quite a strategy in the development towards genocide, is that the perpetrator would blame the victimized group for exactly what they were doing. Kungura also claimed that RPF, which stands for the Rwandan Patriotic, this Tutsi diaspora community in Uganda, itself had admitted to genocide. And the newspaper also claimed that the Tutsi resembled in their ideology, and that they even used them. And finally claimed that the Tutsi cannibals. So the most famous example, probably, of one of the illustrations is from around 1993 in Kangura. The gentleman on the right is named Kayibanda, and was one of the lead proponents of power. And the sort of at the top and along the side asks, the top suggests sarcastically that the Tutsi are the race of God, and then along the side asks, what should we do about this problem? And to offer an answer, there's the illustration of a machete, which the prime implement used to kill during the genocide. Radio was an even more effective means of incitement and execution of the genocide in 1994. The reasons were significant. First of all, in Rwanda, relatively low literacy rate. In the mid-'80s, it was around 47%. There's also been this, not only in oral culture, a tradition of passing along stories. Radios were widely owned. Government even distributed additional ones, even during the genocide, so that even more could be transmitted by radio. Radio Rwanda was effectively the mouthpiece of the, and it also brought inaccurate information, among other things, and claiming that Tutsi were planning genocide, and so they should be pre-slaughtered. And because there was very little to other information, there were no library, there was very little to the outside world. Rwandans really couldn't check the veracity of any of these statements in the newspaper or in the. Hate radio, Radio Television Libre, RTLM, broadcasted really lively and gossip and inaccurate and interviews. A lot of people listened to it. It was incredibly, and this also was part of the reason why listening to the radio. Simon Bikindi, who was one of the later defendant in Jenna prosecution at the time, was an incredibly popular musician, and he listed his songs on RTLM. And one of them said, in reference to the two, "Remember this evil that should be driven as far as possible so that it never returns to Rwanda." Before 1994, which was the day the Jenna started, RTLM actively incited the violence. So RTLM dehumanized and demonized Tutsi. I wanted to give you an example of some of the things that they were saying on the radio. It's shocking. These are quotes. "They, the Tutsi, look hideous with their bushy hairs that are full of fleas. They look like animals. Actually, they are animals. The Tutsi cockroaches are bloodthirsty. They dissect their victims, extracting their vital heart, liver, and stomach. They are main cockroaches. The Tutsis are ferocious beasts, the most vicious of hyenas, more cunning than the rhino. The Tutsi have always been evil. They may smile and wink, but they will children away. We can't let Tutsi attack our country. I'm ready to stand up and fight using everything. We must take sticks, clubs, and stop them from destroying our country." RTLM exploited the ethnic tension that had really been caused or at least exacerbated by the powers, the Germans and then the Belgians, in order to provoke this slaughter that occurred in '94. Ultimately, when Habyarimana, when his plane was shot down on April 6th as he was returning peace negotiations in Tanzania, RTLM immediately the RPF, Tutsi group. They broadcasted, "The cockroaches is irreversible. The only remedy is extermination. Kill them all, take them out." Beyond inciting the genocide, he was instrumental in orchestrating these troops. So after the genocide erupted, radio became even more a source of information and analysis for Rwandans than before that, in part because things were even more cut off people were even more because of the conflict and inhibited travel, access to outside media. So the government told Rwandans to listen to the radio broadcasts, and the radio itself urged to kill Tutsi. Example, "The graves are not yet full. Who is going to do good work and help us fill them?" They also directed listeners to construct lists in a search for Tutsi generally, and then specifically named individual places that they were running to and hiding, so they would be targeted. This all led to a fascinating and really precedent case before the UN International Criminal Tribunal. It's now known as the media trial case. There were 3 who were jointly indicted and prosecuted between 1996 and 1997. The tribunal, by the way, is in Tanzania. These individuals were Jean Bosco Barayagwiza, Nahimana, and Hassan Ngeze. Barayagwiza and Nahimana were the co-founder officials of RTLM, this hate radio, and then Ngeze was the founder and editor-in-chief of Kungura newspaper. They were each convicted at trial, and the trial judges stated, "Without an armed machete or physical weapon, you caused the deaths of thousands of innocents." This case raises important principles in the role of the media, which have not been addressed at the level of international criminal since Nuremberg. The power of the media and to destroy fundamental human values comes with responsibility. Those who control the media are accountable for consequences. On appeal, the convictions were overturned, but they were each sentenced, including for direct and public incitement to genocide, manipulating the media. So all of that's sort of the background, the inspiration for this project. There's actually quite a lot to be out about. Not only were Brian Ngeze and Nahimana convicted of various media incitement violence, but also there's been an upsurge in the literacy rate for various reasons. I mentioned before that there was a 40% rate in the mid-1980s. Now there's closer to about an 80%, almost in literacy. And I think that we have hope is that there's an out library in Rwanda. I started working on it in 2001. It took over 10. We finally opened it this past in an inaugural ceremony. This is a picture from the children's room inside the now functional library in Kigali, by the way, is the capital of Rwanda. They're really more than just buildings. I've avoided this inscription over the door of the library at Thebes in ancient Greece, which said we're medicine of the soul. And so even 2,000 people really understood just how reading and literature, the development of a healthy democracy. Andrew Carnegie, who's credited as being the founder of the modern free public, said, "There is not such a cradle of purity upon the earth as the free public library. This letters where neither rank, office, nor wealth receive consideration, where all men are equal." Our purpose here, especially in a city that had such atrocious and violent ethnic conflict, was to make this institution accessible and free to everyone, regardless of what group they may have come from. The library include specialized literature, but it also has sections on business, we hope to the development of business skills. In addition, we have sections on Rwandan literature and culture, and given the problematic past of division in the country, we hope helps to build a common national identity. The real focus in many ways is children in the library. I'll show you in a minute a little bit of the facilities. Given, of course, that children of this country, this should really be our priority. We knew from very early on that, especially children, there was a really young Rwandan boy who was about 12 who came into our office in Kigali, and he one Rwandan franc, which is about a tenth, and he said to help build my public library. This is the architectural plans were for the rendering in around 2001 when we were just starting and really know what we were doing. Let me show you a little bit about sort of progressed to look like over time. This nation being built. We're starting to see the frame take shape. Rwanda's climate is such that you can year round, and also as you raise more money, sort of build in stages. So this what sort of took several years. This is now the full of the library. So hopefully it starts a little bit like the architectural rendering the first year. This is the library looks like today. This is on the left-hand side with one laptop per child, which is now distributed something like 300 laptops in all throughout. They've got sort of a room to them, and it's in the sort of the wing right there. Another side view of the walking in. This is looking out, and the building that you can sort of see in the background is the U.S. Embassy. We are right across from them. Their view is to look at us. Early on, unfortunately, they weren't a donor. Now they have an American corner of the which is fabulous. They brought in many more books, also running like SAT classes in there and doing lots of other stuff, which is fabulous. There's also a French corner from the French. This is what the lobby looks like. There are reference computers in front of the elevator shaft, periodical stands across from them. A lot of people in the genocide were severely injured, and so we were really sensitive to the idea that this needed to be fully accessible to everybody. That's the elevator. Is looking up. In the distance, you can see part of the reference. So this is the children's room. Those chairs are incredibly comfortable. I'd actually never seen them before, and the kids love them, so it's good. This is the computer club is dedicated to for the children. Actually, the one laptop per child area is also for children too. This is the kids hall where we run various programs like storytelling. A lot of children come on those, and a lot of people come to volunteer to read. We're also now showing movies and other things. This is the main computer cluster, 35 terminals. The entire area is also wireless. So between one laptop per child, the American corner, the French corner, the kids cluster, I think there's now 100 computers in the library. This is the nonfiction section. This is the atrium looking down. This is the main reading hall. I think it's got a really beautiful view in the background. This is the rooftop cafe. We didn't realize how popular and so it turns out people reserve it now for events, which is great. Now a revenue stream for us. We also decided after that people really loved it, to build exterior stair so that it can still be open after business hours for the library itself. These were months ago before we finished, and that all of this now is filled out in operation. This is the fiction area, part of the fiction area. If you're Harry Potter, you can probably spot this book. There's more fiction. Most of the library is quiet, and so we've got dedicated meeting rooms to come to discuss. We have a young adults section as well. This is the atrium back up to the main floor. We've got a few of these meetings. This is a multi-purpose meeting room that can about 60 people. This is this interesting sort of interior bridge over to the reference, and this is that reference area. And then this is walking out, and that's the U.S. Embassy across. So back to the puzzle, if you didn't cheat. So does anybody have another besides Uzbekistan as the second country that is double land?
Congo?
Nope. It's not in Africa. Yeah? Nope.
Not Uzbekistan or
No, it's not. It's not lands.
Bhutan?
I used to live, by the way, of Bhutan. It was my clip in grad school.
Go again.
Give up? Gonna give out? No one's gonna get the book? I guess it's more of you will have to buy it. All right. So nobody else? What's that?
Maybe more geography classes.
It's Liechtenstein. Okay. Questions, comments? Yeah, Chloe.
I am interested in the funding the library,
Yeah.
both from the building operational standpoint, but then also the sustainability.
Yep.
And I think my interest is primarily when we're talking about the social entrepreneurship,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of focus on the business model
Mm-hmm.
and the sustainability with it. So
Mm-hmm.
if you could maybe have some knowledge to
Sure. I might start by saying that a more narrow and I think definition of social entrepreneurship would even consider social entrepreneurship. Some of the other that are profiled in the book meet that more traditional definition, and I tend to have kind of a broad. Let me start by saying a little bit about the funding, then how that's kind of changed over time. So we started this about 6 years after the genocide stopped, and many people were skeptical that Rwanda was sufficiently stable to build some sort of new civic institution as the ambitious one. At that, one that was being led by society and not by a central organization or by the United Nations or something. And so the several years were really slow going and incredibly frustrating. And then we finally sort of reached this point. It took about 3 years. We had enough kind of big name that then things started to and it's really funny to see how, once someone kind of, or a famous institution signs on to something, how that really, cascades. Some other interesting phenomena, I talk about this in the book, is that early donors donated more, some up to 5-6 times. And the lesson that I drew from that, and I think you should draw from that, is want to see you succeed. Often if they've contributed, they might contribute. And that was, that's not, it was really helpful to learn that. So there are 5 categories of, there's intergovernmental nations, there's governments, corporations, nations, and individuals. The intergovernmentations that donated were, for example, the European Union. The Union actually gave the money to the foundation. The governments that have donated, especially early on, were the governments of and Switzerland? I can't remember. The corporations did Boeing for some random reason. Very grateful. I know this is recorded. Thank you, Boeing. It was really sort of a surprise. I would sort of categorize these into those donors that have an obvious connection to Rwanda or to genocide literature, and those that don't. It was just kind of surprising. So, when you're fundraising, go for the obvious or the connected targets. And we did that early on. I mean, we had sort of phases in which we would hit various of these categories. Governments that might be related. And I mentioned that Belgium, for example, had been a car in Germany as well. And so, those are you would probably want to reach out to early. Boeing has no clear, at least not to me, connection. Neither, by the way, does the Target, the corporation, and yet they were an incredibly generous funder. Some of the foundations that donated are not surprising. The Fossey Gorilla Fund International. If you ever have been to Rwanda, or if you chance, I highly recommend going to see the silver gorillas. They're spectacular, and it's really the Verdens is one of the only places in the world you can see their habitat. And Diane Fossey actually quite literally gave her life helping to conserve them. So as part of the purpose of the library is to teach about conservation, make environmental literature also accessible to the public. The Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund did have a connection. And we've also had others who donate, also probably for environmental reasons. And then individuals who worked or have some sort of connection to Rwanda did so incredibly generously. I mentioned that one revenue stream is the cafe. That's enough to sustain the library. The owner to the library, although initially, is the government itself, Rwanda. They obviously have a very clear interest in seed. In fact, they've sort of that beyond. They've embraced this institution as kind of the cornerstone of what is an ambitious public proliferation throughout the country. The Rwanda Library Services. The KPL, the Kigali Public Library, is now the end of that, and so the government of Rwanda has given most amount of money, and they've pledged to continue. So while it is not a business that is sustaining, and therefore perhaps does not claim from sections as a social enterprise, if you take sort of the broader view, something that was innovative at least for this, and used various business skills for a socially beneficial cause, at least it might qualify in that.
Tell us the story of the book. How did you decide together it?
Sure.
And how did you decide who would be included?
Thanks. So I really have much to read when I was starting this. I was in my early 20s, just gotten out of college, and I was working for the U.S. government and working on war crimes issues when I began traveling to Rwanda. And it just seemed like such an odd thing to do was to build this library again, given the say I offered about how media had really been a contributor to the genocide. So not really having much to read, I'm sure I and my colleagues had a ton of mistakes, and maybe that's why, that's part of the reason why it took so long, maybe 10 years. This is probably, part of the story. And all throughout, and actually pretty much in everything I do, it's whenever I'm traveling or doing or whatever. And I other people in this sort of enterprise space, although actually at the time wasn't the term, who were operating in the role and doing similar things, not necessarily but working with orphans or with women's rights or whatever. And we all had sort of similar things about, how do you attract funding, how do people locally, how do you partner, first of all, find and partner with indigenous organizations, how do you make your project as sustainable, if not sustaining, then at least sustainable and safe. How do you make it environmentally friendly, and so forth. And so we began sort of, including the counterintuitive ones, or at least the intuitive ones, like donors will often donate repeatedly. And others, like sometimes, and this was a difficult lesson to learn, sometimes you need to fire volunteers. I thought sort of coming to this that, all volunteers, we should be grateful for any help that we can. And in the early years, all we remained grateful for everybody. We found quite a lot of people. And it takes a lot of time to kind of ramp up, to get on the same page, to train them. And it further turned out that some people went for sort of mixed motives. Maybe they had a significant other who was interested and sort of for that reason, but then when the relationship soured, also left. Maybe they were doing it for other kind of reasons. Or maybe they just weren't that good. And so then the lesson that we learned from that was that we had to be a little more about even the free labor, that we received. Another sort of counter thing, or at least was that it turns out it's actually quite easy. So there are You sort of say you're building a library, and they're like, oh, I've got like a boxes of books in my attic. But what they don't tell you is the quantity, quality, or the type. And of course, a public library only needs 3 copies of anything. And you want it to be in good condition. I mean, you want it to look good, you want it to be inviting, you want it to be welcoming, you want it to be not missing pages and stuff. But it turns out they're willing to give you the books. Another problem coordinating the shipment, as I mentioned, Rwanda is landlocked. So then you got to coordinate shipping vehicle, like a big tractor trailer, ship it into Rwanda, clear customs. That whole process takes it out. Some people might try to use you. So I had an offer from a publisher. This is shocking. One of the big publishers, which offered to give me $10,000. Great, that's amazing. Didn't offer to ship them, but still, that's really helpful. That's great. So we would have to ship it, which of course costs a lot of money and time. So just sort of on a whim, I said, what are these books? Can you give me an inventory? And so the guy's like, yeah, sure, that's great. No problem. I'll get back to you tomorrow. And so sent me a one-page letter, which included the titles of only 7 books, thousands and thousands of times over. And some of them were highly advanced, incredibly outdated in organic chemistry. And so it turned out, the conclusion can easily be made that this was, they were trying to use this as a tax dump, which is awful. And I told the guy I was pretty disappointed and upset. And he's like, well, I thought we were, you need books. I was like, really? Is that really what you thought? We needed highly advanced, very outdated inorganic chemistry. That's what we needed. So going through this process, this is a long way of just sort of saying that there was a lot that we learned, and I learned, and others learned, and it made sense that we'd want to share this. And so in the process of working on this, I started talking to other people who were kind of doing some similar things, especially in post-conflict areas, as that's a particular context that requires a certain approach. and it has certain challenges that are different than if you were to do a social enterprise, for example, here in Washington. There's some similarities, but there are some crucial differences. And so, a few years into it, I said to these new colleagues that I had made, why don't we just all kind of write it down? People, we all lamented the fact that there's nothing for us to read. Why don't we leave something, something that we can share? And so that was the inspiration for the book. And the way that I found them was really just kind of working in the space. A lot of these folks were also classmates of mine in grad school and law school, and we kind of found each other because of our mutual interests. Yeah.
Were some of the funders concerned what would happen next, going back to the sustainability question? We'll build this great building if we get there, and then what's going to happen next? Like, what are the next steps? And then are you or anybody else in the board concerned about the involvement of the government in the funding, given the history that you just told us?
Yeah. So I'll start with the first one. People were really concerned. As I mentioned, it started just 6-7 years after the genocide, and part of the reason that we didn't get any funding or very little in the beginning was because people were so concerned. Some people even took it to really inappropriate level of making jokes about it. If you build a library, what are Rwandans going to do with it? Are they going to bash each other with the books and kill each other, paper cut each other to death? Which was very difficult to hear. And then, in addition to that, there were more legitimate concerns about, what is the sustainability? This isn't a business. How are you going to keep generating funds to sustain it? So, yes, it was a real concern. Our answer to that initially, before we sort of developed this ongoing relationship with the government, is we would continue to fundraise. And who knows what's going to happen? There's always a possibility the whole thing will be an utter and total failure. But at least it's worth the effort, and worth trying. And there was a core group of us that were all committed to staying really involved. And so that was our answer to the sort of sustainability, at least financially. As for the government involvement, so this, just so everybody's clear, this is a different government than the one that perpetrated the genocide. This government is led by the RPF itself, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, which is the Tutsi group that fought in from Uganda and actually stopped the genocide. That militia was led by a person named Paul Kagame, who's now the president of Rwanda. And yet there have been criticisms of the Kagame administration that they have not been as favorable towards free expression, freedom of speech, as perhaps we're familiar with in the West. Their response would be, look, we just went through a genocide, and part of the problem was all the myths and misunderstandings that were swirling about in society that contributed to the violence. And you all in the West sort of have the luxury of having a lot more of a stable society and not the history of violence and ethnic strife, especially that we have. And by the way, you also have limits on freedom of speech. And so, we're less than a generation out of the genocide, and bear with us, effectively, is their argument. And so, do we have concerns? Yes. Just like you would about any governmental involvement, which is why we have an independent board that sort of supervises things and works with the executive director on the admin of the library. Yeah.
So I have kind of a question, but they're
three
short.
parts.
Wondering, it sounds like the library is actively used, and I'm wondering how far people have to travel to get there, and how ethnically diverse what the library is. And then the third is, are there peace and acceptance offered for children and youth?
Okay. So the travel is really, it's in the capital, and a plethora of Rwandans live in the capital, and it's pretty secure in the capital. So at least for those who live in the capital, it's pretty. Now, of course, what do you do about the people in the country? Those who can't pay and or don't have the time to or are not interested into the capital. Zambia, over the years, an incredibly successful mobile. And so we're thinking about how do we share our resources in the country, which, by the way, is tiny. It's the size. So really one of the great things about working in a tiny country is you can kind of get around it pretty quick, which is good for us. We've also been partnering with a lot of the other libraries with it at the universities, and we're even busing in school children, so they field trips to the library. Anyway, it's actually like you just walk in and there's like tons of kids all the time, which is great. So, you know, travel issue, we're still, how do we share the resource more? And I think we're going to, I mean, public libraries are popping up through this Rwanda Library program that the government is running. And because we're so large, we'll probably continue to share resources with them. And then we've also been talking about the possibility of exploring a bookmobile as well. About the ethnic diversity of the clientele, it's a little passe. I don't know maybe what word you might use. Ask people nowadays which ethnic they are. Actually, if you go back quite a ways, whether there really are significant differences in the ethnic groups. Hutu and Tutsi have intermarriages. They share a language, culture, religion, and you know, it was really the sort of colonizers came in as a Hamitic myth that they had also implemented on Jews. The idea that the measurements of your nose, you know, if they were a certain width, would indicate or a certain racial subclass, or that, you know, the size of your head, or the proportion of your head to your body might indicate, you know, whatever. These were all imposed on these ridiculous pseudoscientific techniques were imposed on Rwandans, and to ridiculous ends too. It would often determine that siblings were ethnicities, which of course can't be the case, and other, you know, and that share of a different ethnicity than their parents. And so for all of these reasons, and also because of how much the sort of ethnic, such as they might have been, were manipulated, today, you know, there's that we're sort of all Rwandans, and so we don't track that, and I'm not sure it's even to do it anyway. In terms of the sort of programming, because we only opened in October, we're still ramping up. I think it's a great idea. Now that interesting when you're applying for grants, a lot of foundations and governments make a distinction in mortar projects and programmatic activity. It turns out that many more are available for bricks programmatic activities, bricks and mortar. This is also part of the reason why it took us such a long time to build the institution. There are various grants available for just the sort of programming that you're mentioning, and we're in the process now of applying for these new sources of funding that weren't available to us. They weren't relevant during the building phase, and so yes, we're really interested in ramping up the programming now, including on peace initiatives. Yeah.
So I remember in one of the pictures you mentioned the Harry Potter book in the library.
Yeah.
And you received a lot of donations from the West.
Uh-huh.
Do you have like an initiative to put more literature of the region? So that, and how do you go about doing that? Because logistics might be easier, but maybe books are kind of more.
Okay, so Kinyarwanda is the local indigenous language, and as I mentioned, there's sort of been this oral tradition. So there hadn't been that much produced in Kinyarwanda. What does exist, yes, we've been making a concerted effort to collect it and showcase it. So the working languages of the library are French, English, and Kinyarwanda. Certainly not in equal proportions, but we're hoping that Kinyarwanda is represented. A new pet project that I've been working on is to develop a prize, an annual prize for the best works of fiction and nonfiction in Kinyarwanda. The idea being that if you celebrate literature, just like there are lots of literature prizes throughout the world, maybe that would help encourage more production of it. And so we're in the very early stages. I have no idea when we'll get this off the ground. It's quite complicated, it turns out, just like everything. But that's a second effort we're sort of pursuing to try to further collect, and not only collect, but try to prompt the production of more Kinyarwanda literature. Yeah.
I just have a question about, do you have any piece of advice for the social entrepreneurs in the room and the entrepreneurs, not entrepreneurs, from your book and from your personal experience that you've taken and could share with us?
Sure. On any particular topic, or?
Just in general, like for you, especially with the deep study here.
Well, the conclusion to the book is about 50 pages and does include recommendations and sort of advice on anything from fundraising to recruiting staff to managing that staff to planning and sort of devising a project even from the beginning. I would say that, and I've been writing some spin-off pieces recently about some of these things. So one of the spin-off pieces, for example, that I recently wrote for the Council on Foreign Relations was about partnering with indigenous organizations. That something that's interesting, and I've noticed this, is that no matter how good your idea is, if you don't have local buy-in, it very well may be rejected. And so it's crucially important, not only because you don't want an idea to be rejected, but also because locals truly are the ones who know their needs and preferences best. And so we're all Westerners here, and if you want to work in developing countries, it's really important to get to know the country, know the people, and find good partners. And that really holds for all phases of the project, not only from the sort of design and inception, but also to sort of pulling it off in the sustainability and the unveiling to the public so that it is a success. So that might be sort of one sort of category of recommendations would be about, generally speaking, working with locals and just how important that is. Another would be about sort of growing your organization. Obviously they're all different, and that affects things. But one sort of thing to note is they all also take different periods of time. And young people are most attracted, or often most attracted, to social entrepreneurship. But young people are also some of the most fickle people. And so, in order, the last thing you'd want, of course, is for a good idea to just be abandoned just because people are kind of left. And, people pursue other opportunities, or they go to grad school, or they move, or they fall in love, or they whatever. And it's not the case that they can always be dependable. And so and not only that, but there are also some very good reasons to leave an organization and move on. Sometimes, just having fresh ideas and fresh meat is helpful. So in that sense, not only should the social enterprise itself be sustainable, but also there should be plans for your organization itself to be sustainable. There should be succession plans for the leadership. Often this is not done. In for-profit corporations, you always have succession plans. And this is part of, I think, making social enterprises, including those that are for-profit, but especially those that are non-for-profit, much more rigorous. And it is that you need to basically treat it more like a corporation, more like an efficient corporation, including succession plans, and also, as I mentioned before, even if they're non-paid. We wasted a tremendous amount of time on dealing with unpaid voluntary employees weren't that helpful in many ways. Were a drain. They're employees and should be as such with all due gratitude volunteering. There's lost so much. If you have sort of topics, I'd be happy to speak to it. I'd recommend checking out you gentlemen.
Could you speak a little bit about it itself as kind of a social enterprise project?
I'm glad you recognize that. I mentioned that in the book.
How you decided who the profits would go to. And two, it's interesting because on the one hand you have information for other entrepreneurs, also giving the profits. How do you balance when setting a price point or something like that?
Point of the book?
Yeah, like do you have any control of that when it's kind of your profit but then giving it away? How do you use that?
Okay, so the cost of the book is entirely set by unfortunately. Interestingly, if you tell a book publisher, this is a book, and also for my first book, I gave all the money as well. If you tell the publisher that you'll usually increase the percentage, at least in my two experiences, of the money that you get, you then of course pay it forward. But it's actually sort of interesting to know that because more out of the price. So unfortunately, the price is entirely set. Publisher, and actually in some ways I've been a little bit the paperback $5, I can't lower that at all. The hardback is $150, and the electronic, which my publisher refuses to sell on Amazon, and only does through, they don't like the terms of Amazon's electronic. The book itself in paperback is available through Amazon, but not the electronic version. That I think is like 30 or so. That's just really, really high, right? With my first book, it was a different publisher. That one was Corsi Press. They're a little more global. They have African publisher partners, and so they did agree to sell a reduced version to local publishers in Africa. This publisher doesn't do that. In terms of who chose to be the beneficiaries, simple. Half of the money is evenly distributed amongst the enterprises that are profiled in the book, at least those that continue to operate. The foreword was written by Bill Drayton, the head of Ashoka, who gets a portion. The afterwards was written by Cheryl Dorsey, the head of Echo, so Echo and Green gets a portion. And he profiled social enterprises, 6 of them to operate, so that's the others. The other half of the profits go to an and her name is Artemis Christo. She was my classmate in college and had stayed on to do a PhD in comparative literature. She took a leave of absence to go to work on one of the social enterprises profiled in the book called the National Vision for Sierra Leone. It was an offshoot of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. While scouting exhibit site for the National Vision, she got into a massive accident, went through the windshield, wasn't wearing her seatbelt, hit a concrete barrier with her head. Jonathan, her next Thursday, come back to Yale for the first time in 8 years. She suffered a head injury, medevaced to Freetown, Sierra Leone, and then medevaced further because they couldn't take care of her to France, fell into a coma and some damage. She's now severely impaired, and her family has virtually gone bankrupt on paying for her medical costs. Decided that as the inspiration for doing the project, dedicated the book to her too. She a recipient, and so those are all the beneficiaries. Yeah.
Some of us are currently in class in a bunch of already taking a course on social innovation. We're studying about qualities that are necessary to lead change. So I was wondering if you could sort of speak to what are the attributes skills that are most necessary for leading the effort, and if you think that there's anything more specific to social entrepreneurship as opposed to just in a for-profit world.
Sure. Great questions. It's interesting. Again, maybe because the definition I use is so broad. There are lots of different kinds of leaders. I know it's completely unhelpful. that are effective in socialists. I guess maybe some of the common threads would be the following: driven by purpose, and so there's the you are inspired by something and that translates into an idea. It's really more the action, I think, that matters. If you're really concerned with the plight of women in a particular context, that actually could generate lots of different ideas. But it's the purpose that you to want to solve, or at least a mirror situation. So I think purpose-driven. A second is writing. Many are really to be in a great institution, coming from great families, great stable societies, and maybe want to keep it that way. And too few people are willing to venture far afield, both literally and figuratively, to work on newer, different things. Especially when it comes to maybe their own money, or maybe venturing into play dangerous, and working with people who might appear to be a little. And so I think that certain problems require, a pretty high level of acceptance. Another characteristic or quality I think would be creative. A lot of I'm really impressed by all the time. People are coming up with all sorts of crazy ideas that you just would never have thought of, and it's amazing. This building a library is probably the least creative thing. I'm just not that creative. I don't know, but it's obvious stuff like just build a library. But some other ventures are incredibly innovative, and that's really inspiring. So I think that's an important quality. And maybe one would be patience. There are so many times that I and others write about their projects in the book. I felt like giving up. I mean, there's a zillion reasons to trying on something, whether it's just taking time, or people say it's stupid, people say it's counterproductive, or it's unhelpful. And having patience, and also I think this kind of purpose quality too. Believing that your idea is good. All this stuff also relates to this traditional enterprises too. Sort of no matter what anybody says, within reason, pursuing something a lot of time. So I don't know. I've read a lot of books on leadership, and I'm always struck by that there's really nothing all that surprising. We'll talk about the qualities necessary for a leader. You know what they are. We're better at implementing them than others, and some people really have some more than others, but. It's something that's always kind of perplexed me. Are people war kind of like the secret ingredient that no one has articulated yet? I just don't know. It's all the boring stuff. That would be my answer. All the usual stuff. Yeah.
You talked about being careful who you take on even free help.
Yeah.
You have the U.S. and taking over a little corner of it. Was that
not taking over.
Well, adding to
yeah.
To the library. Was that a tricky road to go down because there might be strings attached?
Less about the strings attached, and more actually about how Rwanda. So Rwandans playing with Americans. At least Rwandans are not okay with the French. One of the sort of like worst allegations against the West from immediately before and during the genocide, the French helped to arm the Hutu militia, which is Hamwe. And the reason why they did that, and a colleague wrote, Cambridge University wrote a book about it called Accomplice, which is excellent and encouraging. The reason why perhaps it was because the Hutu are Francophone largely, and the Tutsi are largely Anglophone. And in the 70s, 80s, 90s, when France was losing a lot of its imperial power in Africa as colonization proceeded, the allegation continues that they wanted to hold on in various of Africa. And so it was widely the Francophone were battling with the Anglophone too, and the French wanted to see the Francophone group win. So there is a double amount of resentment continuing to against the French, and again really of allegations about arming and these militia forces that and further allegations of the front all along, what they were and what they were doing. And so that's a sensitive issue, is to, work with partners who they may not be mostly accepted in the local society, but things have gotten better, and also things have gotten. One measure, by the way, of just how much Rwandans hate the French is Rwanda is the second country ever that was not a Commonwealth, a former British colony in the British Commonwealth. It voluntarily elected to do so just in the past few years. Some of it made economic because all of its neighboring countries like Uganda and Kenya are in. And so for trading purposes, it makes sense that we speak English. But it was also in part just to further themselves from the Francophone sphere. So that has a diplomatic, a sensitive issue that diplomatically wrestle through. In the back.
Academia, what do you think is, or what do you think the role should be for universities?
Yeah. Great question. And John and I have talked about this a little bit. Also coming out about this probably next month in Law for Change. I don't even know where to start. I'm so excited about it. In part because, as I mentioned before, the field is really self-consciously new. This is precisely the most time to be, I think, an academic social enterprise. You can help develop the field, develop methodologies. The love of being an academic, which is why I chose this very month to become a full, is that you have the time to really drill down into the issues and to spend on methodologies through research. And so, again, I don't even know where to start. Let's take law schools. I'm a lawyer. What can you do in academia? You can set up clinics. Georgetown is now going to have, I think, social enterprise legal clinic. Is that correct? In the country. So even as a student, not yet as a grad, be able through academia to work on social enterprise. There are courses pop all over the place in law schools. I mean, schools traditionally had courses on social entrepreneurship, but we see them now in international service. So we're seeing them in international affairs. I've been teaching at GW for the last couple of years. Various social enterprise courses. We see them also at the undergraduate level. It has relationships with universities throughout the country and partnering and helping support the development of curriculum. And then, as a professor, you can, in many ways, innovate. You can be, maybe this is taking the definition, but maybe you can be a social entrepreneur on social entrepreneurship. I don't know. There's so much you could do. You could build these clinics. Sort of other sort of partnerships, and then you can do your own research. I have a piece coming out February 4th about this big piece on crowd. And so the Jobs Act in April was passed by President Obama. It has in Title III, there's a provision on crowdfunding, and that is a pretty exciting way that enterprises and small businesses will be able to raise, not just through collecting donations, but also offering. This is new. And it is, maybe it requires academics to really kind of what that will mean. Different ways that those might be fashioned, because the Security and Exchange Commission has not yet completed. So academics have been helpful in suggesting what that might look like. I think actually it's pretty, and because of the time we find ourselves in it being so early in the development of it. Again, I think it's the best time to be an academic. I think we're really fortunate, students and faculty, just right now, so that we can contribute to the growth of the field. Any other questions? Yeah.
Well, congratulations on the home project.
Not sure. You mean in terms of social enterprises themselves, projects? So, you build a library and everybody's a library guy. So I've been asked to build big library for Palestinians. So it would be like the Palestinian National Library. I've also been asked to help a big national library for the brain. Haven't decided yet whether to sort of do that, but I might. So sort of stay in the space of library development. I'm also sort of helping with other enterprises that exist. It was mentioned before that I served the board of Indigo Africa, that sort of produces scarves and other sort of trees and home decor products in the West. I love the organization, people I work with through it, and that's something I've been spending time on. And then a lot about the field. I really want to help to the development of curriculum and in full-time academic. I feel like I can do that a lot better. You know, in some ways, I think my biggest contributions at the moment will be through in sort of writing and speaking. But I think I will always have, you know, a role in the actual practice. I think it's one of those fields that you need to be involved, you know, to continue to be fresh and innovative in what you're doing. It's sort of, you know, teaching about. So, yet. I also should say I'm always going to remain involved in library. There's a lot more. I mentioned this literary prize, and that actually takes you know, no time to sort of think through the list of it and how do you staff it, what happens if some people are unhappy with the selection. You know, there's a lot to work through. The prize itself be, and also just making sure that this, you know, goes. I will be in my whole life, or I hope my whole life, and so that of course takes a lot of time. So
I think we have time for one or two.
Sure. If you hadn't asked one yet, go ahead.
I was wondering if you have time to spread the word
About the book?
especially the book, because it's such a topic still, and also kind of like the money will go to the cause, and what is your plan to know that?
Great. So how do you spread the word? I hope you will tell your friends. Bye, guys. Bye, Chloe. I hope will tell your friends and colleagues about. There's also, I should mention, on the Books Companion website, there's a resources link, and it, I think, every single book on social entrepreneurship, every single network, every single academic. It took a very long time to compile. It's got something like 700, and you can sort. So I hope that people, you know, will use the book not only in terms of what's in the book itself, but also the website for its sources. There's a tour associated with the book. It turns out interesting, at least in the field of entrepreneurship, if not book. And so there's so far 30 stops. I just came back yesterday from Israel, just to give a couple of talks. Social entrepreneurs are doing very exciting things. And so I was speaking at a law school there, embassy, with Israeli social entrepreneurs. On Wednesday, a Fordham Law School, on Thursday Law School, and a few others. And so the sort of includes law schools, business schools, and other, like the department is interested. That's how I'm trying to promote. One more. Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could speak personally and kind of just tell us a little bit about what motivation, like,
Sure.
where was it something that you sought out, or did you have like a sort of like the other path?
Yeah. Okay. I think it's hard to know what makes us tick. There's certainly things that have happened in my life that have propelled me to working on atrocity issues. I'll tell you what those are. I'm not sure that that's why I work on this. I think it is. I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist or whatever, but I'm Jewish. A lot of my relatives perished. And I grew up in a part of the country that has like 0 Jews. I'm outside of a mid-sized town. And you know, a lot of people I knew, you know, thought that that killed Christ and blamed me personally. Some people spat on me and hit me. When I was 2, somebody picked me up over and smashed my head into this stone so hard that my head bled pretty badly. And stuff happened. I had a bar mitzvah, and a lot of my friends were on his. Their parents said we were going to sacrifice and that we wore yarmulkes to and then the genocide happened in Rwanda when I was in home. I was like a regular high school kid. I was a wrestler in high school, hanging out with my girlfriend and stuff. And didn't pay much of the news, but that really affected me. It seemed like, my family and other Jews had suffered was very similar, but Rwandans had suffered. The same complaints also of nobody helped. And I didn't do anything that didn't do much in college except for start to study. That I then kind of felt like it actually should be Jew, should help foster the most, or some combination. There are other genocides. And so that's how I got interested, I think, in atrocious crimes against humanity. And then that led to first job, and then that led to me being in Rwanda if there wasn't a library. And then also, pretty geeky guy, so I spent a lot of time in libraries. I like libraries. They're great. They're sanctuaries as well as playgrounds. It just seemed like a no-brainer to me.
Thank you so much for tonight and sharing your insights. I enjoyed it. So, thank you.
And again, the folks who are here working on this stuff, even definition than me, I'd love to hear what we're up to. Thank you very much.
What are you teaching right now? Are you teaching a course?
I just finished teaching a course on transitional justice, the field of the different options that countries could choose among to deal with their past serious human rights violations. That mission.